I need to know how Skynet gets built.
What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be talking about this whole Project Stargate thing. This is a huge project, $500 billion. That's a $500 billion investment going into AI infrastructure. But what does that even really mean? So today we're going to talk about some of the companies and the people behind those companies to try and get some insight into what these people's motivations are, what they want to do with their companies, and where this may be headed. First off, though, I'd like to welcome the latest member, Chuck. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate your support. And anyone else who wants to support this, they can go to bmc.link/politictech. There's many options there, including crypto. So this project, this Stargate project, it's going to be headed by SoftBank. Mayoshi, I believe his name is, something like that. It's also going to have Sam Altman, Larry Ellison, and other people I believe are going to be working behind the scenes. For instance, I know Palantir just moved over to Oracle server, so that's another possible connection. I do believe that the use of Palantir is possibly just something that's unspoken at this time. This is just speculation, as mentioned, but knowing some of these connections, we're going to dive into it. There's also other big tech names such as Jeff Bezos with Amazon. That was someone at the inauguration address, as well as Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Now, what's interesting about Jeff Bezos, he heads Amazon, which happens to be one of the largest, if not the largest, defense contractors in the entire country. So there's a lot of interesting connection here. Now, is it really just going to be used to fight cancer? That was the speech given by Larry Ellison, that it's going to help cure cancer. And of course, you want to build support behind your $500 billion investment, but is that what it's really about? Well, let's take a look. It looks like it's going to create, they say, 100,000 new jobs in America, and it's also going to give us an AI advantage. But what is interesting, it's going to focus on reindustrializing the U.S. while also, here's the key, enhancing national security. Now, does that mean that it's just going to be enhancing national security in the competitive market of AI, or is it going to incorporate various types of surveillance? Well, we do know that AI is fundamentally a surveillance technology. It depends completely on data collection, and that includes mass surveillance. So let's take a look at some of the people behind it, and this is Sam Altman here. He's also the head of WorldCoin, which is something you may have seen, those iris scanning orbs that people are walking around with, doing iris scans to, quote, prove personhood. Now, this is something that's going to be like a digital ID system that is going to be in charge of by Sam Altman. And also on their website, some months ago, I noticed they had information on universal basic income. I did not, and I could not find that today for some reason. I'm not sure if they removed it. But what's interesting about that is they talk about a privatization project of universal basic income. So they want universal basic income coming from private corporations. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these big companies, corporations, big tech, a lot of them get government subsidies. So they are subsidized in a lot of places by the government itself. We know Elon Musk got billions of dollars, for example, in subsidies from the United States government. So how much of that is going in versus coming out? Well, also, even Elon Musk mentioned, and he was a co-founder of OpenAI. It was started as a project that was supposed to be an open source model. Well, what happened there? Well, this guy decided he wanted to make a profit, and he saw the dollar signs, the billions of dollars that he has gotten personally for making it go private. So that means no transparency. It means they can basically do what they want. That means that your ChatGPT is collecting everything you tell it. It's probably analyzing you in all kinds of different ways. And then, of course, that data is going to be collected, possibly even for Stargate. We'll see, right? Well, maybe we won't see because it's all private and you're not going to be able to see what they don't want you to see. Not only that, with AI and these, little chat agents, you can tell it whatever you want. You can ask it whatever you want. But here's the real real kicker there. It's filtered out through the way the developers and the creators want it to speak to you. So you think it's giving you real information. People treat it as if it were God, as if it had all-knowing knowledge. But really, it just gets things wrong a lot of times. They call it AI hallucinations. That's a nice PR terminology there. They call it AI hallucinations because they don't want to talk about inaccuracy. But really, it's all there. Now, Larry Ellison, he has said some interesting statements last year to billionaire investors.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video.
The Skynet funding bill is passed.
So he says to these investors, he comforts them, because I do believe a lot of billionaires are concerned about their safety, especially with everything going on in the world this day and age. Well, a vast AI surveillance system can ensure citizens will be on their best behavior. That's the words of Larry Ellison, the head of Oracle, who's in charge of this Stargate project. And this article's just from 2024. So does it connect? Is it going to be a vast AI-fueled surveillance system? Is that what this Stargate project is going to be? Well, the funding would match, because that's the type of funding we would need for something like a project that is a mass centralization of all these different surveillance systems.
The Skynet funding bill is passed.
He even talks about that. If you go into the article, he said this gleefully, that it will ensure citizens are on their best behavior with this new era of AI-fueled surveillance. He was speaking to investors at an Oracle financial analyst meeting, and he shared his thoughts on the future of AI-powered surveillance tools. So he said it would be used in the future to constantly watch and analyze the vast surveillance systems. So basically centralizing all of this data to come in like a fusion center, like we see those fusion centers. So it basically would take everything together from security cameras around the country, police body cameras, doorbell cameras, and vehicle dashboard cameras. I just want to add to that last part that self-driving cars are covered in sensors and cameras. So they're basically surveillance drones. When you think about it, these self-driving cars are going around monitoring everything around them in so many different ways. And part of that is to avoid collisions with other cars and pedestrians, but it could definitely be used more so as a surveillance drone. And so Larry Ellison goes on to say, we're going to have supervision. He's talking about us. He's talking about police as well, which I do believe police need supervision. If you're going to be carrying a gun, a loaded gun, and if you're supposed to use that as part of your job, of course you need a body camera. They should not have an off button to those body cameras, but I don't believe this mass surveillance AI system is the right solution to this. But of course, this is the kind of thing that people are going to say, oh, that's good. Police are going to have supervision. But guess what? It's going to infringe on all of us. It's going to infringe on all of our liberties.
This is going to sound a little bit crazy, but I think the free speech debate is a complete distraction right now. I think the real debate should be about free will. And we feel it right now because we are being programmed. We're being programmed based on what we say we're interested in.
Because when you think about it, if you have mega corporations that are in charge of these mass surveillance systems and AI analysis, you're not going to be able to have human autonomy. Your free will is tied to your privacy. And that's something I believe a lot of people don't even realize. We don't even think about it. Day to day, when we're doing different things throughout our day, saying different things, you may actually hold your tongue when you realize that your possibly social media is listening, or your devices around the house, your smart devices are listening. So people change their behavior based on these surveillance systems, and these systems can be used to enforce the behavior they want. So these companies are getting massive levels of power. So Ellison expects these AI drones to replace the police cars in high-speed chases. I'll go a step further and say they may even have an individual drone for each person that they're interested in. You may have people that are followed around day to day by a specific drone that's been assigned to them. That is very possible. And we've already seen something like this with advertisers that have used drones to collect all kinds of wireless identifiers. That's a real thing. They already have drones that can follow you around and collect wireless identifiers to track you further. So that is interesting. We also see there's a partnership with Elon Musk. That's interesting. So it sounds like Ellison's Oracle company also works closely with Elon Musk. I wouldn't be surprised if he were a part of this Stargate project. And I believe what we're going to see is a lot more names and big tech firms coming out, including things like, in my opinion, I think Palantir is going to be part of it. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. They've also moved their servers to Oracle. We know that Larry Ellison has a partnership with Elon Musk.
You get into the software, the model companies like OpenAI and X.
So I believe all of the American AI companies are going to come together. Not only that, but foreign ones as well, including Middle East AI. MGX is one name I haven't heard a lot of information about. But I do plan to look into this, so make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in learning more. We'll probably cover this topic again. Now with OpenAI, the other organization that Sam Altman heads, there was a whistleblower very recently that came out and talked about their use of copyright material and talked about their concern that it was harming artists. Now, as an artist, I completely am on line with that. I totally am against people's artwork being stolen. You're replacing 50 hours of handmade work with something you can just click a button and try and clone. So I'm not a fan of that. Of course, I see the uses for it, but this guy came out and he ended up dying. So there's some interesting information on that has come out. They've done a second autopsy. So the first autopsy ruled it a suicide. So this is the poor guy who came out as a whistleblower. He was one of the people who helped design ChatGPT. He came out as a whistleblower against OpenAI, and they ruled it a suicide. Now, this was in San Francisco. I certainly am not suggesting anything happened that involved OpenAI. I definitely have no information there, so I'm definitely not suggesting that, but I am reporting on it. So let's go into it and how they found him in his apartment. Now, what makes it not look like a suicide? Well, there was blood all over his apartment. Blood all over his apartment. They even found hair from a wig that was not his on the door. So that's interesting. It could have been a visitor, maybe, possibly, but why was there blood all over his apartment? Why was it smeared over the apartment in places where he was not found? So he was shot in the head, and they said it was a suicide, but why was it an over-top shot? You know how difficult it is to perform that on yourself? Something's just not quite clear cut in this case, and I'm going to look into more information. So they even had signs of a struggle, including a head injury. So it had trauma to the head. So it sounds like there was some kind of abrasions or some kind of bruising to his head trauma, possibly even a cracked skull for all we know. So his mother went for a second autopsy and expressed disbelief at the suicide ruling. And there was no suicide note. There was no actual information to suggest a suicide. But there was signs of a possible murder. And his mother believes he was murdered. So he couldn't find another job. Now, I'm not saying that OpenAI had any involvement in his death. I don't know that, and I don't believe that. There's no reason to believe that yet. But I do think it's awful interesting that this poor guy who became a whistleblower was found dead. It was ruled a suicide, but yet there was signs of struggle. There was, an exterior head trauma. So he had some kind of contusion to his head, as well as a gunshot wound to the head that came from a 30-degree angle over top, which is not typical in a suicide, and then the blood all over the apartment. Very strange, very strange. So in other news, I want to talk a little bit about why these public-private partnerships are dangerous.
human decisions are removed from strategic defense.
Well, they take away transparency. For example, we have the Freedom of Information Act, which allows people to request information for public release. So you can get more transparency from government if you file a Freedom of Information Act request. Now, here's the problem. With public-private partnerships, not only do you have these government subsidies that are funding these big corporations and contractors, you also have exemptions. So they can prevent releasing that transparency to you if it contains what they call a trade secret. So all they have to do is claim there's trade secrets involved and they can redact everything. So unlike a government-run system, when you have a corporation, a public-private partnership, you can hide all that information. You can pretty much get away with hiding information if you can call it, privileged communication or trade secrets or commercial information that they consider confidential, which is pretty much everything. Pretty much everything you'd request in a Freedom of Information Act request would involve some kind of commercial information that is confidential. That's the whole purpose of the Freedom of Information Act. So, what do you think about the Stargate thing? I mean, he looks like a guy I could trust. I mean, every time I see him on video, he looks well composed and he looks like the kind of guy that I would trust. What do you think? What about the others? SoftBank, we have a Japanese billionaire who's also going to be the chairman of Stargate. This is a chairman of SoftBank, a Japanese bank, who's going to head the American Artificial Intelligence Infrastructure Project that's going to focus on national security and other subjects. So interesting. They say, of course, the medical stuff, but I don't think Big Pharma is going to let them get in the way of their profits. When cancer treatments will cost $30,000 a month, they're not going to lose that for some kind of AI project. Just don't see that happening. In good news, on the other hand, Trump has pardoned the Silk Road creator Ross Ulbricht. Now, of course, I'm not supporting Silk Road, darknet markets, things like that. I'm against drugs. I do believe this case, he needed to pardon Ross Ulbricht because this case was completely corrupted by a few corrupt agents that were involved. Not only were they involved in this investigation and prosecution, they were stealing money, extorting, money laundering, and obstructing justice related to the prosecution of Ross Ulbricht. When you have multiple agents in a prosecution that have been convicted of extortion, money laundering, and obstruction, you should be dropping that case. That case should be thrown out. How can you allow corruption in a prosecution and then still convict a guy without parole, life without parole? To me, I'm dumbfounded by that. That should be a clear-cut throw out the case. The judge should have dismissed the entire thing, in my opinion. And that's only to protect the justice system. As many have said, it's better for one guilty man to go free than for many others to be compromised with corruption. So this DEA agent was sentenced. There was also Homeland Security. It was involved in corruption related to the Silk Road. So they were stealing bitcoins, they were extorting him, and they were laundering the money for their own personal gain. So, of course, I support the pardoning of a corrupted case against Ross Ulbricht. Of course, if it was a fair case, that would have been different. If they had done it by the book, that would have been different. But when you have corruption in a prosecution, you really shouldn't be able to pursue it any further. It should be a penalty for corruption. So I want to know in the comments, let me know what you think. Leave a comment and let me know, what do you think Stargate's really about? Do you think it's really there just to cure cancer? Is that really why they're putting $500 billion into it? Or do you think it could possibly be for Skynet? I'd like to know what you think in the comments, and I want to thank everyone who supports this, anyone who's sharing these videos and posts. Really appreciate your support. It matters, and it means a lot, and it is encouraging to continue this. So thank you guys so much for your support, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Stargate. I want to know what you think. I'll see you guys in the comments, and I'll be back later with more on how to protect your privacy.
It becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. The Skynet funding bill is passed.